Thanks to everyone on the Zoom for joining tonight's or this afternoon's, depending on your locations, Private Equity One-on-One office hours. This is a chance to ask me any questions that you have on private equity. If you want to start putting the questions in the chat now while we kick things off, we'll just start ripping through the questions and try to see how much we can get done by 9 p.m. Eastern. So with that, I'll give a quick background on myself and wait for the questions to populate here. But my name is Max Meyer. I did my undergrad at Tulane University in New Orleans. I started my career in investment banking. I worked in TMT investment banking at Goldman Sachs before moving to Thomas H. Lee Partners in private equity, which we can talk about in a bit. And then I moved from there into a crossover fund, doing public and private investing, all in enterprise software and tech. And I am beginning my MBA program at Wharton next week. I have worked with a number of clients for investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, and MBA recruiting, which you can see on my Leland profile. I think I have about 20 some odd all 5-star reviews from former clients, and you can see some of the firms where those folks have placed, which is a pretty good smattering across banking and private equity. So for today's session, I can answer questions about some of the topics on this slide and more. A lot of the common questions that I get are about on versus off cycle recruiting, different firms, interview preps, how to handle headhunter conversations, technical and modeling prep, case studies, partner conversations, and some other paths besides buyout private equity. I just helped Leland run a private equity boot camp where we spent time with folks going over case studies, paper LBOs, LBO prep, and some other things. I've also taught private equity recruiting to about over 300 people at this point through primarily nonprofit before, and have since moved to Leland after finishing up my job. And so I'm focused on going really deep with clients on private equity recruiting. I've got a number of clients active on Leland that we're working on buy-side recruiting prep for, and we've had some really good success recently with some folks as well. So this is a link to my profile, and I'm also offering a 1 week only $50 off my private equity package, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. We can go over some of these topics and more. So resume reviews, LBO modeling, paper LBOs, technical prep for private equity, behavioral prep, mock interviews, networking, headhunter conversations, and more. And I've had this be a pretty successful model for the clients that I've worked with historically. So I'm going to go back a slide, pull up the topics again, and I can start ticking through these questions. I'm sure there will be a lot. I see Jack. Likewise, when talking to headhunters, what should we expect, especially without having any transaction experience? What specifics should I have on location, fund size, and questions like that? So just so everyone knows on the call, without assuming anyone has any knowledge coming into this, headhunters are the gatekeepers to the private equity industry. They determine which candidates get shown to the private equity funds for interviews. And so you will have conversations with headhunters, particularly if you're in your banking analyst program or getting ready to start your banking analyst program. That's become very commonplace, specifically in on-cycle recruiting. It kicked off this year before folks even hit the desk for their banking analyst training. So it gets earlier and earlier every year. A lot of times, these people do not have transaction experience. Maybe they work on something in their internship, but generally speaking, they don't have a lot of transaction experience, and that's understood. I think that you have to tie in other parts of your life, your internship experience in college, deals you worked on it, and your natural interest in private equity. So for instance, everyone who's worked in private equity has read Barbarians at the Gate. It's sort of the quintessential LBO book. And I would suggest reading that. I would suggest being familiar with different topics in the industry, listening to different podcasts, reading newsletters, being really on top of your things and showing you have a pulse on the industry is a great way to demonstrate that you're interested in private equity and serious about it without having that transaction experience. When it comes to telling headhunters what you're looking for, you need to thread the needle between giving them too broad of answers where they think that you don't know what you're talking about, and too specific of answers where you're precluding yourself from participating in processes. So You might say, I'm interested in the Northeast. I'm interested in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. And maybe that's the right answer. Maybe you're from California and you work in New York now and you're open to going back to California or working in New York. But you don't want to say, I'm interested in every city, every fund size, every strategy, every industry. Kind of looks like you don't know what you're talking about. It kind of looks like you're not really focused and sure. And they're not sure if they show you an opportunity if you'll actually take an offer. So you have to sort of thread the needle on some of those questions. Happy to go into more detail on that in a bit, but want to keep taking through the questions. There's a lot. Can you go into private equity straight out of undergrad? A lot of the larger mega funds are starting to do analyst programs for private equity. So Warburg Pincus, Blackstone, firms like that are having analyst programs for private equity. They're highly competitive. These are, the top students who know they might be able to bypass banking and go into private equity for those funds. Now, there might be smaller funds that also have analyst programs, and you might be interested in going after those, getting that private equity experience early, and foregoing banking so that you're really focused on the job that you want to do and you want to do going forward. So there are analyst programs to answer your question, but they're fewer than the banking analyst programs. Someone said, seems like there's a lull in recruiting now that on cycle settled, which is true. Am I missing something? Should I reach out to headhunters again to renew interest? I don't want to miss the next wave. So on cycle recruiting, for the most part, is wrapped up at this point, and there's a little bit of a lull. People are trying to figure out their headcount needs, but I think that you'll actually see a decent ramp here soon in opportunities for off-cycle, quasi-on-cycle recruiting because analysts or associates of these private equity funds are filtering out. People are going to business school. People are maybe leaving after they're on summer bonuses. A lot of private equity funds will continue on that path. Maybe they're fixing their headcount, adjusting. Maybe they underhired and now they're looking to add one or two folks to their associate programs. And so I would say that it's always good to stay on top of the headhunters. Always continue to raise your hand and say, I'm still interested. I'm looking at X, Y, and Z opportunities. Here's an update on my progress. Here's an update on the deals I've worked on, and making sure that they're well aware of, the different things that are going on that make you a better and better candidate. So I think it's important to, again, continue to focus on that. What works goes into managing hedge funds and how do people work with each other there? So hedge funds are a whole nother beast. And I would say that I might save that even for another session if there's interest from folks in learning more about hedge funds. But the gist of it is, hedge funds are really focused on public markets investing, taking positions, long and short typically, and making bets on companies, whereas private equity is typically more focused on taking a hands-on approach with private companies, working with management, working on operations, being really intimately involved with the companies and driving value over a long time period. And hedge funds are more focused on sometimes shorter term gains. And so I'll leave it at that for now, but happy to talk more about that in another session or in one-on-one coaching. Recommendations for current non-MBB consultants interested in the value creation or operations side of private equity? This is a great question, Kevin. I think there are a lot of really fantastic consulting firms that are not MBB that hold a lot of clout with private equity investors. So when I was at THL, we spent almost all of our time working with Oliver Wyman. They're an example of a consulting firm that has, really strong presence in a number of different industries, and they might not be as broad as MBB, but they're really much better and deeper in certain areas. And so we'd work with them. We'd work with other sort of specialty consultants like that in specific industries. And those folks are better equipped, actually, I think, to handle some of these value creation operations roles at some of these private equity funds. So THL, we had a ops group, value creation group specifically for, financial services. And those folks came from either in industry or they came from consulting and were able to do a really good job there. I think that, again, this is a little bit different beast with the value creation versus the investing team. So I might, again, save this or talk about it one-on-one, maybe a little bit more, but I'm seeing a lot of people in my MBA program from some really fantastic consulting firms who are not MBB that have, aspirations to go into these roles. And I think that those opportunities do exist. So that's a great question. Staying up to date on PE news and deal flow from an industry level. So I'll give you one example to start is Private Equity Hub. PE Hub is a really fantastic website that has all details just on private equity, just on how funds are operating, deals, trends, etc. A lot of people in private equity also read other different types of newsletters. They read Deal Book. They read Pro Rata from Axios. People on the earlier stage side of things will read Term Sheet from Fortune. They're a good podcast, depending on kind of what you're interested in. It's Growth Investor. Some people really like Acquired. That's a really fantastic podcast too, if you're looking to get really deep on companies and get an understanding of how, companies are formed, how people drive value in companies, operational changes, and things of that nature. Colossus owns Acquired, and they also have another podcast called Founders, which does double click on founders, maybe a little bit earlier stage, but still really good, well done work that I think is helpful in private equity. Someone's currently in an MBA program, 29, very likely to be post MBA, IB associate when 30 is their way, could exit to a senior associate role when I'm 31, 32, be older than folks. I've seen all sorts of people from, different vantage points break into different roles in private equity. A lot of times people will do investment banking and then they'll go into private equity. Sometimes people will go investment banking, or they'll have a really strong side on the operations and they can come in and sort of be in a more generalist seat where you do investing and operating. I think there are folks who are older, younger, people are on different paths. And so I don't think necessarily that, you're precluded from any opportunities based on age or experience. Also, no one has to know how old you are. That's actually not allowed to be asked in interviews. It's ageism. So I think there are ways you can position your story to showcase why you have the best skill set for those roles. And so I'm happy to talk about that more with other folks. Any tips in order to look for internships in private equity? I think a lot of it is driven by one, headhunters, and two, if you can develop relationships with people maybe at smaller funds, work your way into getting internships there. What schools do PE headhunters recruit from undergrad? So the analyst program is a little bit more nuanced. A lot of people apply directly to those programs. And so, there are schools, again, that would be considered target schools maybe for these programs. Like NYU Stern's a great school, Wharton's a great undergrad school. There are a lot of good undergrad schools where people place into these roles, but you're going to want to be in the top of your class really wherever you are, and you're really technically prepared. You probably have done summer in banking, a lot of folks who break into these PE analyst programs. So that's just like a quick overview on that. And I'm going to go rapid fire because we have a lot of questions. Navigate recruiting for London-based, 1 year in a TMT-IB in New York. And when you bring up to headhunters, it doesn't lead anywhere. There are headhunters that focus on different geographic areas. And so I would encourage you to think about that. I would encourage you to network with firms in London. If you have connections to London, or if you can make a trip to London, that might be advantageous as well, and to set up some meetings there. There are different ways to target different geographies, but if you're doing TMT investment banking in New York, I think that, some funds in London would be excited to have someone with your experience. People are asking, is it common for people to get into major PE or asset management from in-house fund administration ops middle office roles? I think that you would probably be best suited for a similar role at a private equity fund from one of those roles. So I would say it probably is much harder to break into a front office investing role from a middle office role somewhere else. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be much harder. Someone asked about single manager hedge funds and value shops tend to only hires that have done a stint of IB plus PE at a mega fund. Do you have much optics on what this may be? So this is a good question. So a lot of people will do banking, then private equity, then a hedge fund. It's a very popular path. People look for this skill set because you understand how to do the modeling from banking. You understand how to do an analysis on a company on the buy side from the private equity side and do that fundamental analysis. And then you can kind of learn the nuances of hedge fund trading once you're in that seat, but you need to have that really strong base of, fundamental company analysis and financial modeling from banking and private equity. So that's my answer there. Rumored that mega fund processes can be 13 plus rounds. Is this accurate across the board? So every firm's going to have their own process. On cycle can be really crazy too, with a number of quick rapid fire meetings throughout the day to keep you in their office and make sure you don't leave before they give you an offer. So it might be like 13 rounds, but a lot of it is just keeping you in their office, not letting you go, so you can't go to another firm and interview there. So that could be true. Yes, I think that there are firms that do 13 plus interviews. I don't think that's common. Someone asked the difference between mega fund, upper middle market, and lower middle market for long-term career progression. So a big thing in private equity is you're going to want to make sure there aren't too many younger partners or younger VP, like people who would prevent you from moving up if you want to stay at a private equity fund instead of going to business school or another fund or whatever it is. So it's really more about, AUM per investment professional and the certain people that would block you from moving up. Some people sort of hit a ceiling at certain funds because, the IC is pretty young, the partners are younger, and it's a newer fund maybe, and there's not as much room upward for people to make that partner track. That's a high level answer. It really is going to depend on the fund, and it's not as much about fund size sometimes. It's really more about, the current dynamics on the team. How to approach recruiting if you have a banking internship for next summer, want to transition to private equity as soon as possible? It's a good question. Again, these are the type of folks that probably fit the full time or fit that sort of like, transitioning role from that banking. They hit the seat and then they have to go through recruiting. The best thing to do is to learn how to LBO model right now and to understand why it is you want to go into private equity and make sure you're buttoned up on those answers. That's the high level answer. I'm happy to go into more detail with folks, again, one-on-one, but with a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm giving some more high level answers to these questions and hope that it's helpful. Does PE hire straight from MBA without previous buy side experience? This is a great question. The answer is yes. People definitely do other things before MBA and then go into PE after. But with that being said, the preferred path is banking, PE, maybe something else, MBA, and then back into PE. That's the most traditional path of the PE recruiting world. Post MBA is pretty competitive, particularly at the top three schools. So Wharton, Harvard, and Stanford have a lot of private equity professionals looking to break into those VP or senior associate seats post MBA. If you go down into the upper middle, probably the lower middle market, you might be able to get some looks with some, nuance. Maybe it's really good ops experience plus accounting experience, or, maybe you did banking, then you did ops, something like that might make you an interesting candidate in the lower middle market. Sophomore with broad experience in IB in the buy side as an intern analyst, looking for off-cycle internship, hopefully in PE that's mandatory for a degree. Where can I look for this opportunity? So again, I'm happy to try and talk about this one-on-one a bit more, but I would suggest that you spend a lot of time networking because this role is not going to be one that's posted online or through a headhunter. It's going to be about developing those inroads. Let's see what else. Dry Powder is another great podcast. Agreed. Thank you for the recommendation, Erwin. Can international students get into PE? Some funds don't sponsor potentially. I'm not sure the nuances of the visa process. Someone asked this in the banking, asked me anything we had before this. There are funds that will sponsor, I know for sure. And I think it's just being upfront with headhunters about your situation and making sure that the funds that you're interviewing with will sponsor your visa. Private credit interview is different from private equity, and would you approach the prep differently? Maybe private credit is another good topic to have an Ask Me Anything on. I would just say more broadly that credit is focused on downside protection versus private equity that's looking to take a hands-on approach and obviously investing in the equity, which can appreciate a little bit more than the credit. The credit investors want to make sure they're going to get their money back and a nice return on top of that. The modeling perhaps very similar, but maybe you take a little bit of a different lens in terms of modeling returns on the credit versus the equity. What do I plan to do after my MBA and decision to go and get it? I'm probably going to stay in investing, probably stay in private equity. I think that there are a lot of benefits to getting an MBA, and it's pretty personal and unique decision for everyone. But I think that, the MBA network, being at a place like Wharton is very interesting. Happy to talk more about it. And Ask Me Anything, but I think it can do a lot of good things for your career trajectory and also being able to source deals going forward and having the MBA network to develop relationships with some folks that might be useful down the road. For an individual with one in hedge fund distressed investing, one P, one public long only internship, is there a way to sell the narrative that mega fund, upper middle market funds for off-cycle internships, analyst seats? This is probably a one-on-one question, so I'm going to skip it for now because there aren't probably a lot of people with this exact background. So I will punt that one. But again, this is what I spend a lot of my time in on coaching, is like taking your unique story, molding it, telling the narrative, crafting it with you, and making sense why you want to be in the seat that you want to be in. So I think this is a great question for a coaching session. how technical was my tech PE interview? In a similar spot, not sure how deep I should go into software modeling KPIs and modeling cubes. Don't have this experience early. Should I get it? I think these things are important. It's going to depend on the fund and what their interview and modeling prep looks like. I think primarily private equity funds are making sure you can do LBO modeling, making sure you understand how the different things work when you go to construct an LBO. Oftentimes, you don't have to do anything too intensive. In my last role, we got pretty detailed with modeling on some of the software specific line items. And so it's something you should know how to do. And you could have to do different customer cubes, KPIs, driving the model on different sorts of ARR analyses and things of that nature, which is important in software. So I would try to seek out that experience if you don't have it yet. What PE career trajectory does someone have between IB PE, MBA PE, and MBA IB PE? I think it's just a little bit more elongated to do the MBA to IB to PE, but again, your career's long, and if you want to be in a PE seat eventually, then you'll take that extra time to do the MBA than the IB than the private equity. So, the other path might be a little quicker, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Someone asked how feasible it is to move from being a PE analyst or associate to PC, which I assume is private credit. They should be a natural transition. If you're a really strong, sound, technical, fundamental private equity investor, I see no reason why a private credit fund wouldn't want to hire you. I think there are also more private credit seats right now on the street than private equity seats. So I think that you would be in a good position to make that move if you're in a PE analyst or associate seat. Do you think consulting gives you a good basis to land to private equity or venture capital? Yes, I do. There are a lot of funds that really value the consulting experience and really seek out a lot of consultants in their associate classes. They do a really good job on deal write-ups. They have fundamental understanding of how to drive operational excellence in businesses. And so I think that, if you're at a good consulting firm and you are prepared for private equity recruiting, that there's a great story to be told there, and you just don't want to go to a firm that has, or interviewed firms that maybe have never traditionally taken consultants. So you just need to make sure you're targeting the right firms. Someone asked, do private equity funds make one do debt capacity testing within LBO case studies? Yeah, that can happen. You could have to run some leverage ratios and different credit stats within LBOs to make sure firms can service the debt, make sure firms aren't taking on too much debt, or that the interest expense isn't too onerous on the portfolio company. And so that could be something that comes up in a case study on an LBO, particularly a longer form one that might come in off cycle, that might be over a weekend, as opposed to a cycle 90-minute LBO test. Good question there. The nuances of VC or growth investing recruiting to go into it from banking analyst program. Probably should do another session on VC or growth at some point, but the takeaway here is I think it's probably a little bit easier at a high level, but there are different skill sets that you would need to make sure you have a firm understanding on when it comes to earlier stage investing in private equity. I think that those investors do a really good job at what they do, and there are some nuances and differences than PE. I'll keep it there for now. How would you get your first internship if you're coming from middle office / operations plus MBA? I think that this would be more focused on your networking and making sure that you're finding a unique angle to pitch your experience. I think the operations piece is probably more transferable than some middle office role, but again, it's going to depend on your situation, and happy to schedule an hour to talk about some of this stuff in a coaching session for anyone that's interested. I'm going to do two last questions since we have 4 minutes left. So what resources do you recommend to master PE interview questions, specifically technicals? There are a lot of great resources out there. We just did a boot camp for private equity through Leland that was really great, that focused on some of the technical aspects. I can cover some different technical questions with you in coaching. I think the biggest thing is, can you do an LBO model really fast, really proficiently, and really clean? I have some models that I use with my clients for 30-minute, 60-minute, 90-minute, and 120-minute tests. And we spend time going through that. So I'll leave it there for now. And the last question I'm going to take is it possible to swim upstream from VC or growth equity, or the middle market to the upper middle market, or does entry point matter in terms of the skill set required for associates? I think that the easiest path to take is to come down market, whether it's from mega fund to upper middle market to lower middle market, whether it's from private equity to growth equity to venture capital. I think that that's the easiest path. However, that doesn't mean that if you're at a lower middle market fund doing all the work on every deal and you're getting amazing reps and you're running with everything and you have an amazing skill set, that you wouldn't be very attractive to a mega fund. You wouldn't be very attractive to an upper middle market fund. Be very attractive to a venture capital or growth equity fund, or the other way around. It really depends on your investing acumen, your ability to model, your ability to go through deals, and some of the skills that you showcase, and how you explain what you've done to interviewers for them to understand. So I think a lot of it comes from crafting your story and having a really good understanding of why your experience fits the mold for these roles. And so there's no one size fits all with that. So with that being said, I know we went rapid fire through everyone's questions. I am happy to find time with folks to go through your story. I'm doing, again, a $50 off my PE package right now through this week. If you're looking to do more intensive prep, if you're looking to do an hour of prep, I'm happy to do that as well. And so with that, thanks for joining tonight. Really enjoyed all of the questions. It was super great to meet you all virtually, and I hope that we find some time to do some one-on-one coaching at some point. I get to know you a bit more and work with you on the different aspects that go into the very intensive private equity recruiting that leads to a very high-paying and rewarding career in the future. So with that, thank you all for your time. Thanks for joining tonight, and I look forward to meeting some, if not all of you, in the future. So thanks and have a good night.